And industry role players have sought to stress the importance of the Agoa agreement extension, highlighting on the added benefits to be gained. The extension of the African Growth and Opportunity Act was announced late last year, expanding the agreement aimed at giving duty-free market access for producers in eligible countries in sub-Saharan Africa. It is now said to enable wider export value-added goods and services from African countries into the U.S. market. Amith Singh from Nedbank Commercial Banking speaks to us about these developments. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Singh. Let's first place the spotlight on the strategic benefits that exist with Agoa's extension, especially for South Africa within the manufacturing and motor sectors.
Yeah, thanks for having me this afternoon. So, plenty benefits for South Africa. I think we were quite nervous not too long ago. Is this agreement going to be extended amid some political instability in the States? And certain senators have been unsure to keep South Africa on. So I think it's a great win for us to have continued to be on this list with this Agoa agreement. Some of the great benefits, I think, is that it continuously promotes investment into South Africa, and specifically the automotive manufacturing industry. You know, we host 7 OEMs in the country. We rely on them for jobs. We rely on them for stability. And part of this Agoa agreement, if we have a look at just the values of funds or vehicles that we export into the States, is 180 odd billion rand in the last term, which is an exorbitant amount of money. So this does add a certain amount of stability, does add a certain amount of confidence in a sector I believe has showed a tremendous amount of resilience amidst all the headwinds it's faced of recent times.
That is quite welcomed, but we must also then hone in on the electricity as well as logistical challenges that South Africa has that could maybe put a spanner in the works with regards to how we are seen by the rest of the globe and what really is needed from the African continent. South Africa being a leading economy in this context, we navigate the global economic landscape, particularly to fit into Agoa.
Yeah, we've had lots of challenges, you know, and unfortunately we've been our worst enemy in South Africa of recent times. We have a look at the challenges we faced with Eskom, load shedding, a tremendous amount of investment had to go in to various plants in South Africa and to various component manufacturers in South Africa to remain relevant, to keep a reputation up, as well as keep producing, you know, at the current levels. We then overlay logistical challenges that we find with regards to our ports, harbors, rail, etc., which doesn't paint a pretty picture. I think one thing that further compounds us is that, you know, geographically, we're positioned at the southern tip of Africa, which again is not really advantageous when exporting into, you know, the northern countries, the likes of EU, America, etc. So, you know, from a policy perspective, from our APDP, the plans that we have in place from a government, from a private sector, have to be on point to support the growth of this. We also have to, I suppose, admit and own to the fact that we're no longer fighting against the likes of, you know, Brazil, Russia, etc., for share of wallet. We're now fighting against our further North African countries, our brothers and sisters up north in Cameroon, Senegal, and the likes, who have both capability and capacity to manufacture within, you know, their own countries. So in order to maintain our, let's call it, gateway for Africa, we really need to stimulate this part of the economy. We need to get our road, rail, our logistical aspects in order. You know, with the elections up and coming, we understand that at the moment things are pretty sensitive. But I have a firm belief that the best is yet to come, provided we have adequate and appropriate support that goes and that's much needed into the sector.
On the latter part of the African continent operating as one economy, where can we benefit to actually present a united front for sub-Saharan Africa and the bigger benefits that could be widened within being a part of Agoa, especially because South Africa cannot do it alone, and if we have those logistical challenges, where else can we borrow from in terms of partnerships and holding each other's hands?
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic point in question. We try and go at this alone as African countries, and we try to go at this alone as South Africa in particular. But if we have a look further north, countries like Kenya, with regards to some of their garments, Lesotho, etc., there's a big value chain that goes into manufacturing. And I think we need to unpack that value chain carefully as South Africans and not necessarily believe that we need to import from foreign countries in order to manufacture final goods here that's fit for export. It's more a case of, the age-old tradition back in the day where you would borrow a cup of sugar, I would borrow a little bit of salt, we'll borrow some eggs, but ultimately we'll bake this cake. And what I'm really hopeful for is that Africa as a country, we start bringing, the sugar, the salt, the eggs to the table in order to bake this African cake that's ready for export. So there's definitely, we're ripe with potential, when it comes to natural resources, we have them in abundance in South Africa. If we have a look at, for instance, new energy vehicles and the route that we're going there, we have a lot of natural minerals, etc., that are available in the country that we can utilize to our benefit. But it's more so of a coming together. I think it's our governments that need to also collaborate collectively, not to the benefit of one country, but to, as you rightfully said, how do we benefit the economy of Africa as opposed to country?
Lastly, you alluded to a matter of principle, but my question directly now is with regards to international relations as well as the geopolitical tensions that we are seeing unfold. We've been at risk before with regards to being part of Agoa or not based on South Africa's stance. What's to be said this time around now that the Russia-Ukraine war continues and the Middle East, that conflict is escalating? At some point we will be asked for a stance.
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting one. So I personally think as a result of some of the challenges that, or not challenges, more so the election period that's coming up in the States, is that the senators and government there is playing a rather safe way around now by keeping this on. However, as a country, we have to remain cognizant of the fact that this is reviewable upon any time in any period. So, while we do see an extension now that we've been granted and we're still part of the agreement, great. But that doesn't take us off, the risk or the naughty list where we can potentially fall off this agreement. So at some point, I think we're going to definitely be asked to take a stance as a country. It does place us in a very compromising position as a result of BRICS and other commitments. One can only hope with this geopolitical landscape that pans out that, with election period coming up specifically in the States, that we would reach some form of stability that wouldn't negatively impact South Africa. The reality is, our export value to the U.S. alone is about 140 billion rand in the last term. As I mentioned earlier on, our imports are about 140 billion, exports are about 170, 180 billion rand. We can't do without this funds from an economic perspective, and it can't necessarily be substituted by the BRICS countries. So at some point, we might have to be in a position to take a stance, which I think is going to be very difficult and challenging for South Africa. But till then, I think we need to build sufficient capability, a good enough reputation out there in market through this, agreement to prove that, we're capable and able of doing this and fulfilling on our commitments and doing so, well.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Amith Singh is with Nedbank talking to us about the benefits that could come out of that Agoa extension.